Hi, everybody. This is an additional module in our magazine presentation, and it's to make up for a shortcoming in the lectures so far. I want to talk about Hispanic media, and I think it's actually time-wise, calendar-wise, it's appropriate that I do so at this point because we've just concluded National Hispanic American Heritage Month, which goes from September 15th to October 15th. And today is October 16th. And this is a month where we celebrate, as you see right here, achievements and contributions of Hispanic American champions who have inspired others to achieve success. And there are many amazing individuals to talk about, and I'm going to talk about one who I happen to know who really introduced me to Hispanic media in my career. And then I'm going to talk about some magazines that are targeted to the U.S. Hispanic population. This is Eduardo Caballero. It's a nice candid photo of him. This is one charming man, let me tell you. Yes, Eduardo was such a pioneer. I'm going to switch to a slide now, which is really, really text heavy, and I'm sorry for this. Eduardo was born in Cuba. And he came to the United States as a young man. Started in 1973, Caballero Spanish Media. And you can read a little bit about, I'm not going to read everything he did, but he was a pioneer in establishing new Hispanic media in the U.S., championing the need to target Hispanic Americans and the set of advertisers targeting Hispanic Americans. I mean, target in a marketing sense here, everybody. This is telling advertisers what a growing, vital, important population this was, whether it was selling it to Procter & Gamble or Lever Brothers or Ford or General Motors or Gatorade or Coca-Cola or whomever. Now, I met him when I was running business development at Gannett Outdoor. This is the outdoor advertising division of the Gannett Company. You may remember from our newspaper lecture that Gannett was the largest newspaper company in the country, and also for a time owned one of the largest, if not the largest, out-of-home media companies in the U.S., meaning billboards and bus shelters and subway advertising in New York. As head of business development, my job was to get new clients, new categories of advertisers to use out-of-home media, billboards. And so I had a team of people, and we called mostly directly on the advertisers and convinced them that it was a good idea to start to put their ad dollars, take them away from other local media and put them into billboards. And we had some success. I was put in charge of a venture where Gannett Outdoor partnered with Eduardo Caballero and the Caballero Spanish Media. At this point, Eduardo had a network of Spanish language radio stations all across the country. And his idea, which was a really cool idea, was to combine the sound of radio with the sight, the visual impact of billboards. And we named the venture Vista Sonido, Sight and Sound, and went around to advertisers and tried to, and succeeded to some degree, to sell them packages. So you'd go into, let's say, Miami, and you'd buy an out-of-home billboard campaign in Hispanic neighborhoods or in areas where the Hispanic population is traveling in their cars every day. And you could show a package, you could show a visual for the product, and then at the same time you're running a Spanish language radio campaign in the market that ties in with the billboard. And we did have some success. One of the things we did, which is kind of amazing, is we got IBM, when IBM was making PCs, to invest in a Vista Sonido program to sell computers, PCs, laptops, and home computers to Hispanic populations all over the country. And we helped them develop the creative. And as far as I know, it's the first computer company to target Spanish-speaking audiences in the U.S. This would have been in the early 90s. And in fact, we were Vista Sonido, which is essentially a media company, became IBM's Hispanic ad agency by default, and we were invited to planning meetings, strategic planning meetings for IBM PCs, along with all their regular agencies. It was kind of amazing, all from the brain of Eduardo Caballero. One of the things that Eduardo told me and that I learned from him was the very obvious fact that this is not a homogeneous population, that there are different Spanish-speaking people from different countries with different backgrounds and different values. It's not just one. Here's the Hispanic market. So, thank you, Eduardo. U.S. Census 2020 showed that Hispanic population in the U.S. is 62.1 million, almost 19% of the population of the U.S. grew by 23% since the last census in 2010. More than half the U.S. population growth in the last 10 years came from growth in the Hispanic or Latino population. And it's continuing, and it's projected, of course, to get bigger and bigger. In a city like Los Angeles, basically half the city are of Hispanic background, Spanish-speaking background. And I'm sure if I were to have all of you in a classroom right now and ask anyone with a Hispanic background to raise his or her hand, more than a few hands would go up. So it's about time we said a few words about this population and some of the media targeted to reach this very important, vital part of the country. So I actually participated a little bit in the census in 2020. I volunteered to be a door-to-door questioner for the census. And I went through the training, but as it turns out, I live in the Bronx. The Bronx had very good response rate for the census, and I ended up not having to even go out at all. I just got all the training. And I want to show you the questions on the U.S. Census about Hispanic background. But first, of course, obviously, there were Spanish-speaking people going around asking questions. I'm not one of those. So the census was very capable of talking to anyone who spoke Spanish, or in many other languages, by the way. There were people who could, talk to almost any language anyone in the U.S. spoke. There was someone who could come and interview them. But the initial push was to get people to fill out the questionnaire online. And of course, there was a Spanish version online. These are back to the English now, these are the questions about background and race. And I'm going to say, I don't know if it's politically correct or not, but I'm going to say, I think basically we're talking about the human race as far as I'm concerned. It's just one professor's opinion. But the census is what the census is. And so I want you to see, these are some of the first questions that were put online and in the interview that you would go door to door. So you would basically take the questionnaire and fill out exactly the same questions that were online if you did it door to door. So question 8 here is person number 1, meaning uh, the person who pays the rent or owns the residence, of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin? No. Yes. So then it's going to be Mexican, American, Chicano, yes, Puerto Rican, yes, Cuban, yes, another Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. Print, for example, Salvadoran, Dominican, Colombian, Guatemalan, Spaniard, Ecuadorian, etc. So, and then here is what's the race. So, white, Lebanese, Egyptian, black or African, American Indian, Alaskan Native, and then some other Pacific Islanders and other Asian types of breakdowns. But there was a separate question about, at one point, Hispanic. I may be wrong here. It would be the first time, probably not the last time. Hispanic was a race. I think it was listed as a race in 2010. It was decided, you know what, that's not really accurate. And by the way, it's not really, in my opinion, accurate for anyone. I think it's your country of your forebears' origin. But anyway, I don't want to get into too much politically sensitive territory. But anyway, 2020 census shows over half the growth in the U.S. is from Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin people. And just to underline the point that I learned from Eduardo, this is 2010. Just as an example, I know it's old, but the point is valid that different parts of the U.S., for instance, in Florida and Miami-Dade, a lot of the Hispanic population has its origins in Cuba, like Eduardo. In Los Angeles, which is by far the largest concentration of Hispanic population, the origin is Mexican. And also a lot of Salvadorans, a lot of Puerto Ricans in the Bronx, Dominicans in the Bronx. And of course, these numbers have gone way up. These are old numbers. But again, this is not just one big, homogenous population. There are people with different backgrounds, different types within the U.S. population. Now, yes, of course, just as there is Hispanic radio, Hispanic TV, Hispanic websites, there are magazines targeted towards U.S. Hispanic population. Here's one. Here's another one. I'm showing kind of the whole website. This is a leading women, Siempre Mujer, for Hispanic women living in the U.S. And this is a big popular magazine. And this goes across, they written in Spanish, they attempt to appeal to all the different populations, the Mexicans in Los Angeles, Cubans in Florida, and talk about things everybody has in common. Here's another one. This is Cosmopolitan in Spanish, Cosmopolitan en Español, published with a joint venture with the Hearst Corporation that we talked about. Okay, so there's that. Here's People in Espanol. This now is owned by, since it was, of course, Time Inc., but the Meredith Corporation, as we said before, purchased most of the assets of Time Inc. And this is People magazine in Spanish. But of course, it's also, now here's another, this is a local one. This is Go Latinos magazine. This is targeted towards Spanish-speaking folks in South Florida. You have your choice of reading it in English or Spanish. And let us please remember that particularly second, third, fourth generation folks with Hispanic backgrounds are speaking English most of the time. Maybe they're speaking Spanish at home. So, it's a little naive to think that all Hispanic targeted media is using Spanish. It isn't. And here's an example of that. For instance, Hispanic Network magazine for business and employment. It's all in English. So, hats off to Hispanic Heritage Month. This vital, growing, population here in the U.S., and we'll talk about, as we move through other media types, we'll make sure that we look at those media that target this important cultural segment.